Wasabi guys, welcome back to another how to build around this commander video. We have yet another brand new commander option from the upcoming set Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, Tatsunari Toad Rider. 3 mana black, legendary human ninja, with whenever you cast an enchantment spell, if you don't control a legendary creature named Kaimi, create Kaimi, a legendary 3/3 black and green frog creature token with, whenever you cast an enchantment spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. There's also an activated ability of 1 mana and 1 hybrid green-blue. Tatsunari, Toad Rider, and target frog you control can't be blocked this turn, except by creatures with flying or reach. A lot going on here, and this is easily one of the more confusing commanders to build around so far, because it seems to be dipping its toe into everything, not really committing to any one of these well, so we're gonna have to, if we want to build around Tatsunari here, make some type of hybrid deck involving one of these categories. I think Frog Tribal is a direction we can go in. We could benefit off of turning some large creatures into frogs that way, making it easier for them to deal combat damage. The obvious direction to build this commander in would be the Enchantress theme, since you do get an enchantment trigger for both Tatsunari and the frog token. There's also some potential to build around life gain. We don't want to discount that second trigger. 1 life could be substantial if you're able to get that trigger several times. We also have constellation cards. This can kind of tie in with Enchantress. It's just not a core part of the majority of Enchantress decks you're going to see, so we'll have access to a lot of really cool constellation triggers that you probably wouldn't see in green and white Enchantress decks, and that comes with the access to black and blue. And of course, since that activated ability does make it easier for us to deal combat damage, we are going to want to experiment with Voltron a little bit. Although it's not mandatory, I think you're probably best off benefiting from auras to kind of tie in with the overall enchantment theme. So let's talk a little bit about frogs. Frogs are not a particularly strong tribe, and a lot of that has to do with the fact we only have so many. Now, we could receive some more in this upcoming set. However, we do have some big ones like Grolnok the Omnivore and the Gitrog monster. Having access to 3 colors would allow you to play both in the same deck if you wanted to, and make it all about the frogs. However, if we're just talking about taking advantage of making a frog unblockable, Yargul Glutton of Urborg is a pretty cool option. That is a whopping 9 power, but I do think we have a better way of fooling around with frogs, especially since we are going to be fooling around with enchantments at the same time. We have 3 enchantments that will help us make our other creatures frogs if we want to. Arcane Adaptation, Conspiracy, Xenograft will make our other creatures frogs, so that if we want to make a big creature, I don't know, something like a Blightsteel Colossus a frog, and then make it easier to connect, I think that's a fun way that we could potentially build around our commander. But overall, I would still say it's a narrow path. If we had more frog tribal support, I would totally say go for it, but as of now, there's only really a couple justifications for doing it, that being Yargul and these 3 enchantments. If we get more frog support in this set, I think that would be fantastic. Of course, we have the Enchantress strategy. This is pretty big. No matter what type of enchantment deck you're building, you're going to want to benefit off of it by getting some type of card draw. That is consistent across all Enchantress decks. And we have things like Citizen Champion, great constellation ability, along with Eidolon of Blossoms, and we have Argothian Enchantress and Enchantress's Presence. Like with all enchantment Enchantress decks, the more focus you can put on enchantments, the better. You want to get more triggers off of our commander too. So you play things like Enchantress's Presence, you're going to be getting those life gain triggers as well. And to continue with the theme of card draw, you're also going to want to benefit off of dealing combat damage. So I'm a big fan of cards like Bite into Thassa, Reconnaissance Mission. Our commander's all about making it easier to deal combat damage, period. So if we're able to deal more combat damage, we're able to draw more cards. And Teferi's Ageless Insight is just a great card if you want to draw more cards in general. You need your resources to synergize with what your strategy is, and I think you get that as well if you're looking to ramp up. So use auras that allow you to get more mana whenever you tap your lands, like Utopia Sprawl, Wild Growth, Fertile Ground. The more focus you have on enchantments, again, it's going to make it easier for you to get off your triggers. If you have a payoff for playing enchantments, you want to make sure that the majority of your card draw, your ramp, is coming from enchantments. We also have some other ways of getting more mana if we want to. We have Carpet of Flowers. It's a little bit risky, it is dependent on your opponent's playing islands, but for that 1 green mana, it is hard to beat. And then Sanctum Weaver from last year's Modern Horizons 2 is fantastic. It's like a Priest of Titania for enchantments, and it'll reward you by giving you a ton of mana. Another strong way that you could build around this commander, although I wouldn't say it's going to be super strong and deep, you do have life gain, life loss. Since we're focusing on enchantments, the 2-card combo of Exquisite Blood and Sanguine Bond is going to be a must. Even if you don't get both of them and you don't combo, individually they're going to be beneficial. Exquisite Blood will gain you more life, Sanguine Bond will force your opponents to lose more life, and then Wound Reflection is just the cherry on top. If you cast a bunch of enchantments in a turn, your opponents are going to be losing double life. Another strategy that I think is pretty underrated, but it does kind of tie into Enchantress a little bit, the overall focus on playing more enchantments, we have the Constellation cards. And a card that does kind of tie into the whole life gain theme is Grim Guardian, because whenever we have an enchantment enter the battlefield, each opponent's going to lose a life. So this in combination with our commander is going to make it easier for us to just knock out players, just slowly grind away at their life totals. A big reason why I love having more of an enchantment focus in black is because we get a card like Doomwake Giant. This Constellation ability will give all of your opponent's creatures -1/-1 until end of turn, which doesn't seem like a big deal until you realize you can set yourself up for a pretty massive turn where you play something like 3 or 4 enchantments and you're getting rid of a ton of your opponent's creatures, or at least making it easier to go to combat. All it does is just sit on the field and it allows you to do that again later on in the game. Great synergy with something like Whitewater Naiads, because our commander's ability doesn't technically make it unblockable. If our opponents have a flying creature or a reach creature they can still block, Whitewater Naiads is pretty much a sure thing. You'll be able to swing in for some easy combat damage. Thoughttrender Lamy is not going to help us out in combat. It's not even really going to synergize with life gain or anything making it easier to knock our opponent's life totals down, but the trigger is insane. Each time you get the Constellation off, each opponent discards a card. So you play 3 or 4 enchantments, that's 3 or 4 cards they have to discard. Just insane. You can slow your opponents down tremendously. And then we have Nylea's Colossus, a pretty underrated card, but the Constellation is brutal, especially if you combine it with any kind of evasion. You're just doubling the power and toughness of your commander. So you keep doing that realistically, you won't really have to get more than 3 enchantments. What's also essential if you're playing any type of Voltron deck or any strategy where you're encouraged to swing at your opponents, we have the auras. We have something like Rancor, which isn't strong necessarily. It does offer trample. We don't really need it on a 3/3. We're more about making it unblockable, but it is nice that you're able to get it back and then replay it. I think that's a huge upside for just this 1 green mana. And then Phyresis does offer us Infect, which is kind of what I mentioned earlier with Blightsteel Colossus. Anytime you can make a creature pseudo-unblockable, you're going to want something significant to happen, and only needing to get to 10 instead of 21 is pretty significant. Ancestral Mask makes it so that we're not dependent on auras specifically, so we could just have a ton of enchantments. We put this on any creature we have. It gets +2/+2 for each of those enchantments, which will also make commander damage a joke. If you just want pure value out of your auras, Bear Umbra is fantastic, one of the best green auras ever made. Not only does the creature get +2/+2, but when it attacks, doesn't even have to connect, you get to untap all of your lands and then continue your turn. Get to play more spells. Oh yeah, and you get totem armor, so it's kind of a form of protection. I'm not gonna lie, not being able to play white does kind of make this strategy a little bit more difficult. So you're probably going to want more protection auras. You have totem armor in something like Snake Umbra, while it also helps you to draw cards. Journey to Eternity isn't necessarily protection, but it does offer us some form of resiliency. Great way to bring our commander back if it dies. And then Eldrazi Conscription's great, especially if you can combine it with any way to make your creature unblockable. One of the best upsides that's still left to us outside of white is the protection that we get in enchantment form in green. Destiny Spinner makes it so that our creatures and our enchantments can't be countered, which is ridiculous value for this 2-mana enchantment creature. Asceticism gives all of our creatures hexproof, and we have a way to regenerate creatures. An archetype of Endurance gives all of our creatures hexproof and takes that hexproof away from all of our opponent's creatures. The deck isn't going to be super strong. Again, we are going to be experimenting with a variety of things. The more often we can keep our board together, the better off we'll be. So if you enjoy the video, please consider subscribing to the channel. I will be doing more of these how to build around videos for Kamigawa Neon Dynasty and many future sets. So far, Kamigawa Neon Dynasty is looking like a very creative set, introducing a lot of new things like creature equipments, utility lands that have great activated abilities when they're in your hand, and probably a ton more that we haven't seen yet. So stay tuned, we will have more to talk about as spoiler season continues. This is Commander Void, I will see you all next time.